So here we go. This is the Accountability Network. It's its new slot on a Monday evening at 7 o'clock because I think a lot of people out there at work 8:30 in the morning or on their way to work and couldn't get to see the live broadcast in the past. Johnny Cox is not with me this week. He's decided that he wanted to go to Portugal and he's on his way back. So he's probably on a plane right now. So we'll see you next week, John. And so some of you may not have seen our live broadcast before. So what I'll do is I'll just run it past you what it's all about. I started the Accountability Network back in, when was it? I think it was October last year. Accountability Mondays, and I decided that I wanted to make myself accountable. I've been through quite a hardship in the last couple of years, some personal shit that I had to deal with, and I needed to get myself back on track. And so I thought, what can I do? I thought, that's it. I'm going to go live on Facebook every single Monday morning at 8:30, and I've been doing that ever since to make myself accountable. And slowly but surely, I got myself back to where I need to be, and people enjoyed it. So we've carried this little tradition on, and now we've decided to do this on a Monday evening to give it a wider audience, so people can tune in of an evening if they wish to after their dinner or whatever they want to do. So it all started for me with a very simple ethos, really. I read a book many years ago called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And Stephen Covey talks about time management, and he has a 4-quadrant there's 4 quadrants in time management. One was quadrant 1, where you've got urgent and important items that need to be dealt with regardless. They're urgent and they're important. Then you add important and non-urgent items, and they're the items that most of us neglect, really. They're the things that make a difference in your life but not urgent, so we tend to don't prioritize them. Then we have quadrant 3 activities, which are urgent and unimportant, and they tend to be like the phone ringing or someone coming in or having to deal with some specific scenario. And then we've got the ones that are not urgent and unimportant, and that's where people tend to spend their time, like, wasting their time on, say, watching reels on one of the social media platforms, or watching a load of unnecessary stuff that doesn't actually get you. It's the sort of stuff that really you probably escaping the world from sometimes. We all do it. I get stuck on Instagram sometimes, flicking through, thinking, what the hell? I mean, some people say I wouldn't dare go on TikTok because otherwise I'd be on there all night. It's so addictive, this stuff, if you're not careful. And there's lots of stuff that we do, watch shit TV. We might just sit around, and they're the unimportant and non-urgent stuff. But the ones I want to concentrate on are the important and non-urgent, the ones that make a difference to your life. So that's exercising, usual sort of stuff. Maybe you read some shit, and I'm sort of aiming this. So I'm going to make an assumption that you're a bit of a go-getter, or you've got a small business, or you're an entrepreneur, and you want to get somewhere in life, or you're not quite getting where you want to go. You're taking 3 steps forward and 2 back. In the worst case scenario, you're taking 2 steps forward and 3 back. So we don't want you in that position, and I'm there to say, come on, let's take a look at and make yourself accountable to make these quadrant 2 activities, these ones that are not urgent but are really important, that will make a difference in your business world or your personal life or whatever. And I think once we understand these things that we've been putting off, we may have some procrastination, or as I quote, hesitation towards some of these things that you should be doing, right? We all got them, haven't we? You know what I'm talking about, right? If you're listening, you know what I'm talking about. And I want to give you a bit of a kick up the backside and say, come on, let's do that. I mean, this is what this whole live broadcast has been about for the last sort of 4 months. It was funny because last week's episode, Robin and I were talking about the amount of subjects we've covered, and I've put them into a booklet, which I'll be releasing fairly shortly, an ebook to help people on some of the subjects that we've covered in the last 12 weeks. And that got me thinking today, well, what can I talk about? Because, this is a bit off the cuff every week, right? What do we talk about? What do people want? And if you want some stuff that you want to cover in the future, put it in the comment section down below, or reach out somewhere and let us know what you want. What sort of content do you want me to cover? And so today I've decided that probably one of the best subjects to cover, and I get this one right. I've been there a few times, and I'll touch on a few things in a second with this. But it's when you get to that situation where I can't be asked to do it. When you really, I know I've got to do things. I know they need to be done, and I really haven't got the energy or the inclination to do it. And I've certainly been there in the last couple of years, I can assure you, since October 2022. And if you don't know, my daughter passed away, and it knocked me off balance, and it took me a long time to try and drag myself out of the mire. Now, you may not be in that sort of situation, but in the past, when I've set things up, businesses, or I've gone into a different direction, sometimes it can feel like you're on your own, especially if you're a small business owner, or if you're an entrepreneur, or you're just starting out, or you're thinking about doing something. You might even be thinking about changing your job. You can't really talk to your work colleagues about it, or something you want to do. And sometimes we just, really? What can I do? And I think there's a process that I go through every single time I've been in that situation. I've always gone through this process. It's a basic process as well. And it's about asking questions. So we think about it logically. We tend to blow things out of our proportion in our minds, and things, we get overwhelmed with things. And sometimes we don't ask ourselves some smart questions. We'll ask ourselves, why am I feeling this? Or what this person's upset? There could be all sorts of things going on at any one stage in your life that adds to all this shit, right? And doesn't make you feel any better. So what do? How do you deal with that? And it's about understanding that if you start asking yourself some smarter questions, and it takes some practice, and it takes a bit of self-discipline. That's one of the things we've spoke about in the last 12 weeks, about having self-discipline. But it's kicking yourself up the arse sometimes and saying, look, this ain't good enough. I'm not gonna tolerate this. I know what I want to achieve. I'm not doing it. So what do I need to do in order to effectively put a rocket up my backside? And so one of the questions I asked myself, and I wrote a few down earlier, is I stop and I look at the priorities that I need to be looking at. Am I prioritizing myself in the correct way? And I think sometimes we lose sight of the big objective that we may have. We've got an idea, and we've got this, and it might be a big idea, and it can be overwhelming sometimes. And this is the key, right? Is if you're feeling that way, the first question should be out of your mouth should be, what's the progress I've made so far? Now, that is assuming you have made some progress and you've got off your ass and done something in the first place, right? So I'm making that assumption at the moment, and I apologize if you think that's assumptive of me, but I've got to start from some place. So I would suggest that I'm appealing to people who have made some sort of progress. And I found it I'm doing 100 life lessons, and they're broadcast they're posted up on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube every single day. One life lesson. It started on the 22nd of January. And there have been a few times in that period where I'm thinking, really, sometimes I'm getting a lot of traction, sometimes it's not. And it can be, I was going to use the word soul destroying. That's probably too harsher terminology. I'm a great believer in the power of language, and it's probably just disheartening. That's probably the word, disheartening. Because you think you're getting somewhere and then you're not getting somewhere. And then you think you're getting somewhere and then you're not getting somewhere. And it can weigh heavy on you. It certainly does on me. And then I start thinking, well, what's the point? If people are going to watch it, what's the point? Well, there's a big point. There's a bigger objective. So I stop and think, okay, so have I made any progress? And I'd had 26,000 views on my YouTube channel since the beginning of this year. Well, actually, that's quite a big. I know it's not a 100,000 subscriber channel. It's quite a small channel, but that's a lot of views on a lot of videos in the course of that short period. So I've made progress. It's not the progress I want by no stretch of the imagination, but it is progress. And it's recognizing if you're in that position where you're feeling like it's on top of you, or you can't be asked, or what's this all about? Look at the progress and tick them off and say, yeah, well, I've done this. Mine every day. I've done 2 videos, the main video and a short. I've done it every single day. I've not missed a day. Look at that progress you've made. See where you've made progress. See the things you've done. And they may not be obvious to start with. Sometimes we have to stop. And I was talking to I've got a coach. And Jimbo was saying to me, fuck me, you've done a lot. You've done a lot of stuff in the last 6-8 weeks. A tremendous amount of stuff. Yeah, but he's going, don't yeah, but me. He said, look at the progress you've made. You've made a lot of progress. So that's the first question you ask yourself. What progress have I made so far? And then give yourself a pat on the back for making progress. It might not be the progress you want, but at least it's progress. That's number 1. And then 2, then you want to ask yourself, okay, what's the bigger objective? Keep your eye on the prize. Keep your eye on that big objective that you want to achieve, that achievement, because that's going to give you the impetus to go forward. So once you realizing you are making progress, you want to actually just revisit that and say, okay, so this is what I want to achieve. My goal is quite lofty. I want 100,000 subscribers by a certain date. I don't do things by halves. I'm always sitting there thinking to myself, no, I want to go bigger and better. And I've got no experience in this stuff whatsoever. I've had a learning curve that's been vertical. So not only have I been doing the stuff, I've been learning as I'm going along as well, and consuming lots of knowledge, which can be intimidating sometimes, especially if you're dyslexic like me and you start having to do things and you think, I want to throw the computer out the window. So having your eye on the prize and keeping revisit that objective, that goal that you want to achieve, the big dream that you've got. Revisit that. And while you're there, remember why you want to do it. All this, esoteric bullshit about find your purpose and your why and all that business. I actually believe it's more basic than that, right? We've all got an idea of what we want, and and we try, and this is where I'm quite honest with myself, right? I'm really honest with myself. And I look at it this way. Why do I want to do it? Oh, yeah, I want to reach a lot of people. I want to help people. Oh, come on. Yeah, there is an element of that. But ultimately, my ego is driving it. I like all this shit. I love it. But if I don't acknowledge that and I dismiss it and say, no, it's about the esoteric greater good, which it is, but that's not the main driver. And when we understand what's driving us towards doing something and what it's going to mean, and I'm a great believer in it's who you become in order to achieve the objective in the first place. Because you're going to go through a journey, right? And that journey is going to be up and down, left, right, all over the place, backwards, forwards. I'll tell you, there'll be a few steps backwards in if you're doing the hard work, there will be a few backward steps now and again. And sometimes you have to do that. You have to say, okay, well, yeah, I accept that sometimes it's not going to be great. Sometimes they're going to be things that I can't do anything about. And one of my life lessons I was talking about recently is accepting the uh, things you can't control, and and controlling the things you can control, the controllables, and don't try and control the uncontrollables, because sometimes we 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 can be fighting a losing battle if we're trying to get people to change. You're trying to get people to do things, and if they're not up to it, or they're doing, you can't do much about it. You can browbeat them if you want, but ultimately you're not going to really change the control the uncontrollables. So when you look at why you're doing it, and there's an essence underneath that of who you're going to become in order to achieve that goal, because that is really big, right? Because that's identity shifts. And I do remember going back many, 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 many years, 1986, and I was selling my flat in Walthamstow, and I was watching the agent, and he was selling my flat for me, and I'm thinking to myself, I can do that. I had no qualifications. I'm dyslexic, so I didn't. I left school absolutely no qualifications whatsoever. I think they were called Fs or unclassifieds. I didn't even turn up for the exams. But I remember thinking to myself when I was watching Chris Davenport working, thinking I could do that, and that I had to change from being a baker to an estate agent. Now, regardless of what you think of estate agents, it was a complete and utter 180 from where I was. I changed my life. I literally, over the course of about 18 months, I was a complete loser. I was in Loserville. Honestly, it was such a bad situation I was in, and I found myself pretty jaded and lost. I'd had a tough upbringing, and I was pissed off with the world, and I was going to the right place, but I had to change. I had to make some drastic changes within me to become the agent, or become eventually the businessman that I became. Because if I didn't change, I would never have been able to have adapted and done it. And it's about adaptation. You have to adapt to whatever's in front of you. Adapt your personality, learn certain skills and traits. Because traits can be learned. It's not a case of you're stuck with them. You can change. Ultimately, it comes down to how you see yourself. The strongest force within a human being is to remain consistent with how we define ourselves. I nicked that one from Tony Robbins, by the way. So if we understand, right, we've got these things to consider, making sure that we've got our eye on the prize. We know what we want, why we're doing it, who we're going to become in order to get it. Look at the progress that you're making. Then we ask ourselves, the next question is, so why am I feeling this? What's causing this? What's preventing me from pushing through this? It's a great question. That what's preventing me? Because if something is preventing you from doing it, we can try and change that. And just having a look, asking that question, you might find, you remember I said earlier about don't try and control the uncontrollables, because that can put pressure on you. So if you're looking around you and there's things you might need to learn, there's things that you might need to consult with people. I'm a great believer in, if I don't know what I need to know, I'll go to someone who does know that. And if it costs me, it costs me. But ultimately, I'll go to that person and say, look, I need this information. Can you help me out? Right? Yes, we can. We can do this, put this into place so I can get the information and enable me to be able to proceed in the direction that I need to go. Because if you haven't got the correct information, you can't move forward. Or it's going to take you longer to try and get it somewhere else. Classic example, I could sit there on the internet and look, and sometimes I do. I do a lot of YouTube searching for specific things that I want to watch. I don't let YouTube dictate to me what I want to watch. I want to make sure that I want to watch. So I'll search the information that I require, look at the person who's who's delivering it, making sure they've got the credentials to do that, and then listen to what they've got to say, learn that, move on. And that's what I do on a regular basis. So if you've got some information you need to get, ask yourself, do I need to pay for that information? Or can I get it from somewhere else? Or can I employ someone who's got that skill because I can't be bothered to go down that route? Because sometimes some of the things we need to learn might be too much of a stretch. But by asking yourself the question, what's preventing yourself, gives you an indication of what you might need in order to make that next step forward. And then there might be other things that during that questioning, you're asking yourself, what's preventing me? Something else might come up, and it might be you need a break. Now, one thing I always used to do when I was prolific in my business back in there's quite a few times, the early 2000s to the financial crisis of 2008, and then probably from 2010 up to 2016. Every year, I used to look at my calendar and I used to put my breaks away in there. And I'm not one for going on 2-week vacations, but if that's your bag, put it in the diary. Think about it. I used to like mini breaks. So every 6 weeks, I'd have a long weekend, Friday to Monday somewhere, whether it's this country, another country, doesn't matter. It's a break from what I'm doing. I'd still probably work, if I take some stuff with me. I mean, I even remember going on a Spanish trip with my family, and I penned half my book during that first week while I was away. And so I don't always just go and have a complete break, but have a break from the surroundings sometimes, because sometimes you need to get out of where you are. Just have that break, and then you can sort of collect your thoughts, because it can be like, if you're an entrepreneur, a small business owner, a go-getter, and it can be overwhelming sometimes. It can be, it can be tough. And sometimes it's a lonely old game, especially if you're a new business or just breaking out into doing something for yourself for the first time. It can be a lonely old game. I know a lot of property investors. A lot of property investors will be watching this, and they're in the same boat. It's a lonely game, property, if you're an investor, because you've not got a big office to go to with lots of staff, because it's not that type of business. So that can be hard sometimes. So ask yourself, do I need to go out and meet a few people, go for a coffee with someone? And then you might even cross over what I was saying earlier about getting some information, just having a chat, can sometimes dislodge some issues that you may have, some overwhelm issues, or some I can't be asked issues anymore, because it comes from somewhere that and we've all, you might be one of these people are totally focused all the time. There's a few of us out there. I mean, I get into that mode. Sometimes I can knock myself off balance, right? But it's not often, because I've got that mindset where I need to focus on this and just get cracking with it. And I usually find a way through. But sometimes I don't. And then I can rely on a few people. I might ring up a mate. I might ring up my business partner, or I might ring up a member of the family, because we all need that support mechanism. And that's my next one, is have that support mechanism there just in case. Take them breaks, but have that support mechanism, because we all need it. There are going to be times. I was doing some work on a program I'm working on at the moment about extreme adversities and how that can affect us and what we can do about that, because no one gives us a sort of manual of how to deal with some extreme adversities. Adversity is bad enough, but you get an extreme one, you know what I'm talking about, right? Then everyone has adversities. Everyone has. We it's understanding how we can deal with that. Many a time I've I've been there when that extreme has hit, and that can knock you off balance. I know it can really knock you off balance. And what do you do then? The quality of your life is in direct proportion to your ability to deal with bad news and adversity. So it's having that muscle, developing that strength and courage when adversity strikes, so you can deal with that. Because it might be you find that I can't be asked anymore is driven by some adversity that might not be in your business. It might be outside. I was knocked off balance in 2012 when my son came home and said, I want to be a woman. I mean, it was difficult to deal with, and she didn't want to be here anymore. So I had that to deal with at the same time, and I'm building a business at the same time. It's hard. So sometimes these adversities, whether extreme or just an average adversity, I'm like, what is an average adversity? Adversity is adversity, isn't it? Really, but how do you deal with it? Have a mechanism in place to try and deal with that. And then once you've looked at all that, reset. Literally reset. Don't be frightened to reset. And reset might be just have a day off. Just sometimes you have a fucking bad day, right? Sometimes you just have a bad day. Sometimes it's accepting and giving yourself permission to, all right, but don't make it too many days, right? You know where I'm going with this. It's just, even if it's a few hours, just give yourself time out. Because sometimes it can be a very, very, very lonely business in entrepreneurship business and generally go-getters. It can be hard. It can be tough. But hopefully that's giving you sort of like a framework to work to, and what I'm going to do on this particular thing is I'll do the transcript and I'll put it up for people to have a look at, like a little checklist. And that little checklist that you've got, you can always go back to, and I'll put it in the comment section, a link to it where you can get hold of it. And I think that's important to understand that sometimes if you have that little procedure, that checklist, that little bit of somewhere where you can go and say, do you know what? I know I've got the resources to be able to get through this. Because ultimately, you're doing it for a reason. Do you remember the big objective? And them quadrant 2 activities fall directly into what we're talking about today, where you've left it, you've not done it. It's got to be done. So let's get on with it. So listen, if you've enjoyed today, just put some comments in. Let me know what you want to talk about in the future. And I'll be here. John will be back next week on Monday evening with me, Johnny Cox, and we can then chew the cud and whatever we got to talk about next week. But listen, it's a blast. It's only half an hour every Monday evening at 7:00. Accountability Mondays, making you accountable for your future. So it's been a blast as always. I love these, but listen. Spread the word around. If you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, share the video to someone who might be able to benefit from it, because some little bits of nuggets in there that people can take and apply to their business life or even their personal life. It doesn't matter. It doesn't business or personal. So until next week, 7:00 next Monday, I look forward to seeing you. Take care.